everybody, and welcome back to the inn. I'm Zach,
I'm Eddie Phoenix!
and we're going to talk about some more cards, because we have a lot of Angora cards to talk about, and we have a bit of a tribe discussion to get to as well. So we're going to start things off with Crystaline Oracle. Crystaline Oracle is a 1-cost, 1/1 priest elemental with the death rattle. Copy a card from your opponent's deck and add it to your hand. This is just a very good card in general. It avoids a lot of the complaints I think that people had with Draconid Operative, because number one, stat-wise, it's not overpowered at all. It's actually pretty weak, but then again, you really don't want it for, you want it more for its effect rather than actual attack power, defensive power. And then it's a death rattle, not a battle cry. So this makes it more like Shifting Shade. So I kind of like it. This is kind of what Priest wants to do. This is just a decent death rattle, and I think most Priest decks will be running this. So this is a very good card. I'm very excited. Of course, it's an elemental, so it's going to help with the elemental synergy. It's a death rattle minion, so it's going to help with your quest. But in general, I think this is a card that Priest probably is going to consider running, because outside of Dragon Priest, there's not a lot of really 1-cost cards that Priest really wants to run outside of Northshire Cleric. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Outside of Northshire Cleric. And really, Northshire Cleric is more situational. You really don't want to play her on turn 1 a lot of times. So just to get this out on turn 1 or maybe early turn 2, just to get some utility from the death rattle when your opponent is likely going to kill it, or maybe you can run it into the opponent's face or just keep on hitting the opponent for 1, whatever you want to do. This makes it very versatile for Priest, gives Priest some answers, potentially for the late game, and it's just a decent overall card.
Yeah. I take a look at Crystaline Oracle, and I love it for a lot of reasons that you already mentioned. Adding to it, of course, the Awaken the Maker's quest. And if anything, when it comes down to it, like, I really didn't see complaints of Crystaline Oracle along the lines where it was with, like, Draconid Operative. I more or less saw comparisons to Swashbuckler, since they carry the same stat line, just the two different effects. First of all,
there were some comparisons to Draconid Operative, but mainly because of just the effect being so similar. I was just pointing out the differences. I think it's actually closer to Shifting Shade.
Yeah, it very much is closer to Shifting Shade, and that's what makes this card a lot more balanced compared to something like Swashbuckler. Because Crystaline Oracle, copy a card from your opponent's deck and add it to your hand. I know the cards that are going into my deck, and so I can start running through the list of possibilities of things that I can think of to play around, or at least think of that could be potential dangers going forward. Whereas with Swashbuckler, just pulling from my class, and me not knowing exactly what it could have pulled, so I'm sitting here playing cards left, right, and center, and then next thing I know, Rogue decides to find a way to be able to just either, like, nuke my board or answer with something crazy and bonkers that I couldn't even expect to play around, and it is sufficiently pissing me off because I don't know, like, if I'm playing Shaman against Miracle Rogue, and I've got a nice sizable board, and then next thing I know, my opponent from Swashbuckler yanked Elemental Destruction. How the fuck am I supposed to know that they were going to have Elemental Destruction in their hand and be able to play around it? I don't. It pisses me off.
So I take it you don't like it when I play Burgle Rogue.
I don't...
What happens when I play Randomonium? Who knows what secrets we will discover?
I know that part, but it's just more or less just on the, like, high-end level of play when you have no idea what your opponent pulls. You can't plot or plan to be able to counter what they're going to throw at you. So you can think, oh, hey, I've got a nice good foothold, and then it's just ripped out from underneath you because Swashbuckler decided to give them the perfect card. And frankly, it's bullshit. But if we take a look at something like, also comparatively, like Babbling Book compared to Swashbuckler, we know that Babbling Book is only going to give you a mage card and a mage exclusive spell at that. So it's a lot more thinking through things that, like, Mage could have pulled from the book, as well as this new Crystaline card of being able to pull from your deck that make at least those two cards a lot better to play against in the long run. And if anything, to kind of like wrap up this discussion on my end, in Constructed, I definitely see this seeing play because of it being a very good one-drop, as well as looking at Awaken the Makers. If it shakes out to be what I expect to be a meta-defining quest card, then yes, this is going to be one of those meta-defining cards. As far as Arena goes, on one end, I say that yes, this card can be played because it's a good low drop, plus it gives you a random card from your opponent's deck. But I also look at it and go, maybe there's a better rare that I can pick up, depending on what they give me in the selection pool. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And you're looking at it from the perspective of playing against it. If you're playing against the cards, playing against Swashbuckler, if you really can look at if as being the one to play it, Crystaline Oracle is still better because you're going, well, Swashbuckler gives him the perfect answer. And that's the wrong way to think about it, because we were talking about a little bit a bit ago about people railing against Yogg or against Jade Idol, two cards that we find that really people freak out about more than is absolutely necessary, and here you are actually freaking out about Swashbuckler more than that's absolutely necessary. Giving you a random card from your opponent's from your opponent's class, that amount of randomness means you can get the perfect answer, or you can get jack squat, or pretty much something that's extremely situational. Whereas with you used Babbling Book. Babbling Book is very good for Mage because Mage just wants to be versatile. So of course it's much better. And Crystaline Oracle is a lot better because getting a card from your opponent's deck is a lot better for you as a player because either number one, you can use their own stuff against them, or number two, it actually gives you a lot of information about what they're playing.
Yes.
And I'm going to say it for a lot of players. Yeah, it's bad if somebody just RNG draws the perfect answer, but it's a lot more annoying when they use your own they use your own answers against you. It's a lot more annoying for a lot of players. Overall, I think we both agree Crystaline Oracle is better. I think you need to desalt from Swashbuckler, but Crystaline Oracle, good card.
Well, no, that's the thing. It's like, when it comes to Crystaline Oracle, I see it as a better card overall compared to Swashbuckler.
And I think a lot of people are making these comparisons because they are class 1-cost 1/1s that allow you to get a card you didn't have before. But really, when you really think about their effects, they're actually all quite different, and they need to be considered to be different, and you need to compare them to more similar cards within the class. Like, there's a reason why I compared Crystaline Oracle to Shifting Shade.
Yeah, and plus it's also like it's a miniature Thought Steal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing too, is that with Crystaline Oracle, I've already got a deck that I'm calling Stop Hitting Yourself, because I'm using not only my deck but stuff from your deck to be able to beat you. So with Crystaline Oracle, it also goes into that ideal of a potential control priest deck, if you want to use it to grab stuff from your opponent's deck and use it against them. So, like I said, if anything, I love Crystaline Oracle. I find it to be a very balanced card. And that's the main point that I at least want to get across in all of this. So are we good on Crystaline Oracle, if anything?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Next card is Sunkeeper Tarim. He is the priest legendary. He's a... Shoot! I'm dumb! He's paladin!
Yes!
We were talking so much about priests.
Priests were getting offended right there.
I was not shifting my brain.
All of a sudden, all the priest players just gave you the middle finger.
Wait a minute! No. Sunkeeper Tarim. Paladin legendary. 6 cost. 3/7. Taunt. With the battle cry, set all other minions' attack and health to 3. I've seen a lot of comparisons to this being a combination of Eldrick, the Pure, and Keeper of Uldaman. I can agree with those similarities being seen with Sunkeeper Tarim. But I also see, with Sunkeeper Tarim, a card that, depending on when it's played in the game, that it can be used as a good control measure against something like the Jades. With people going, oh god, Jade Druid's gonna be so OP in this next meta, or oh god, the Jade mechanic's gonna be so OP in this next meta. It's like, guys, relax. We don't know what the next meta's gonna shape out to be just yet.
Oh no, the pants may restrict my belly.
Exactly.
I don't know where that was going, by the way.
But with something like Sunkeeper Tarim, this also allows you to be able to kind of think outside the box for your deck building and deck construction. Like, if you want to play the Paladin card that allows you to summon 5/1/1 Silverhand Recruits, on turn 5. And if they don't get dealt with, just because your opponent doesn't feel threatened by them, and then you decide to drop Sunkeeper Tarim, you've now got 6 3/3s, or at least, no, 5 3/3s on board, and a 6th 3/7 with taunt, compared to whatever your opponent's got on their side of the board. Now, yes, these are dream scenarios and things like that, and Sunkeeper Tarim may do that scenario, or it just may be used as a control card to be able to bring the Jades down a bit going forward. But for right now, I think Sunkeeper Tarim is a playable card. And you're going to have to do some testing to see where he will end up in the long run. And I throw it over to Bob.
Yeah, I apologize for the whole pants thing.
Oh, no.
I was trying to come up with just like a good throw-out joke thing, and for some reason, pants came to mind. I'm going, I have to do with something with pants. What can I do with pants? Yeah, and then it ended up being completely stupid. Anyways, Sunkeeper Tarim is wearing pants, but Sunkeeper Tarim, I'm not sure I'm as optimistic about this card, Eddie.
I can understand
I've
that.
thought it over. Just the fact that it affects both sides. This is not Eldritch the Pure. This is not Eldritch the Pure. Eldritch the Pure, it was a lot more viable to stop Jades. Because they couldn't just suicide the Jades to get rid of them. You could basically neutralize a huge field. They have a lot of defense, but they're not going to be doing anything. And if this did something like Eldritch the Pure did on your opponent's side of the field, or if Eldritch the Pure had taunt or something like that, it could be very good. But just the fact that it's both sides of the field, it makes it very situational. And then you have to deal with the other side of the field, because if you play Sunkeeper Tarim to deal with that other field, then Sunkeeper Tarim by himself is still not going to stop the threat. He can stop 3 minions. And if they have a full field of something like Jades, okay, you dealt with 3 minions, there's still 4 that are coming at you. So you need to be able to play Sunkeeper Tarim with another answer to take care of that field. And besides something like just suiciding minions and trading off to reduce the damage, Paladin really doesn't have a high cost AoE. Their best AoE would be Consecrate, which number 1 would mean you're taking a full turn 10 just to do a Tarim Consecrate combo, but Consecrate only deals 2, so that's not going to take care of the board. If you want to use Sunkeeper Tarim in a control type deck, because you're either going to be using Sunkeeper Tarim in a variation of the small time recruits deck, where you're just having a whole bunch of small little things, or a control paladin. You're not using Sunkeeper Tarim at all in Buffeted, which is I think a lot of players kind of want to try to get Buffeted to work in the next expansion, and Sunkeeper Tarim is the antithesis of that. This is not a card you put in Buffeted. Maybe,
oh God, no.
Maybe control, but again, if you're going to be playing this in a control situation, you then need a follow-up to take care of that board, and I really don't see any follow-up that can pair well with Sunkeeper Tarim, and that's why I'm going at this card going, in the right situations, maybe if the stat line was buffed in some way, or there's something, maybe it just affected, your opponent's side or something like that. I don't know. I'm having a hard time seeing how useful this card really can be in a control situation. Because maybe in a little small recruits deck, maybe it works. Maybe I don't know why you would be playing that instead of something like Buffeted, but maybe if you're going for Control Paladin, which is kind of cool, you need that follow up, because when you play, we're going to talk Keeper of Ultimate, okay, Eddie?
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing Keeper of Ultimate in a control situation of Paladin, you're not just playing Keeper of Ultimate in a in a vacuum. You normally play Keeper Voldemort, and then you follow it up by getting rid of a minion. You're using Keeper Voldemort as a way to get rid of that minion. You're not just Keeper Voldemort and go. You don't just Keeper Voldemort the minions and go, well, my job here is done. Onward. You Keeper Voldemort, and then you play a card and get rid of the minion. Without that follow-up, without that sort of follow-up with Tarim, this card is not as viable as you're saying. You basically would either need to trade most of your board just to follow this card up, which I don't think is viable at all, or you're going to need some sort of viable AoE to take out that board, and Paladin just doesn't have it.
It doesn't have it currently, and I know right now, if anything, there's the quest card, which that won't give it the AoE.
Yeah.
But there's also 4 other cards that haven't been released yet for the set to be able to potentially follow up with Sunkeeper Tarim. Now, for me, when it comes to Sunkeeper Tarim, I was, as far as the viability of the card, I was mainly also pointing out some of the big highlight things that you can do with it. That's why I put it in the... Realistically, this card is playable. But you're going to have to test it to see where you want to actually put it. Because, realistically, you need to figure out where he'll fit in before you actually take this to be able to say it's actually very good, or, better yet, meta-defining, and he's neither of those in my eyes. He's just playable.
At the most, I could see maybe trying it in a controlled Paladin deck, but like I said, Paladin needs to have a follow-up, which they do not have. And without that follow-up, I just don't think this card is viable at all. I mean, like I said, part of me wants to like this card.
I know.
But I just don't see this card being viable. I just don't.
If anything, maybe within the next 4 cards that get released, maybe something may change your mind.
I hope so. I hope that Paladin actually has decent AoE. And I don't mean the... it has AoE, but it hurts everything. I mean it affects the enemy's side of the field in particular.
More so than yours.
Yeah. Next up, we have Shadow Visions, which is a 2-cost pre-spell that discovers a copy of a spell in your deck. This is a game changer. This is a meta-defining card. And I don't think a lot of people are getting how big this card is. One of the biggest problems if you're playing, I would say almost any deck, but especially I found when I'm playing Priest, is when I'm behind in Priest, and Priest has a lot of control options, so I know I have a lot of the control options to basically take care of a problem on the board. But it always seems to happen that when I need a particular card to show up, that's when it does not show up. And Shadow Visions answers that problem. Basically, Shadow Visions, the whole purpose of Shadow Visions is to get a potential answer into your hand so that you can take care of a problematic board state. I can't tell you how many times in Dragon Priest I would want my Dragonfire Potion. It just does not show up. Shadow Visions could give me that. Shadow Visions could give me any of the Shadow Words. Any answer that I need that I know is in my deck, Shadow Visions gives me a very good chance of putting it in my hand and making sure that I have it when necessary. And yes, if it's a large cost card, a high cost card like Dragonfire Potion, chances are that I'm going to have to delay a turn to use it. You know, like I'm not going to be able to use my answer right away. But that's taking a turn to Shadow Visions to find the answer is preferable to not being able to draw the answer at all. This is a meta-defining card. This is going to change the way Priest is able to play and control the board. They're going to have the answers. They're going to have the exact answer they need when they need it, and that's going to allow them to survive and take care of some of the more problematic decks that sometimes defeat Priest, but that they know that they can beat. Shadow Visions equalizes the field, and it's going to be the defining Priest card, and I think probably one of the defining cards in this expansion. So I am excited about this. I'm making sure I'm going to have a copy of this.
You've hit everything except for like one thing that I know you didn't hit on the head with Shadow Visions. Right now, like the top 5 cards when it comes to Shadow Visions that you're gonna look for are Shadow Word Pain, Shadow Word Death, Shadow Word Shield,
Shadow Word
Holy
Shield?
Nova, or the
Power
it's the one cost
Power Word.
Power Word, excuse me. Power Word Shield. Dragonfire Potion, and Holy Nova. Those are your top 5 that you're going to look for with Shadow Visions. Because you're going to be able to just keep, like, 2 copies of each of those in the deck, and then you've also got the potential to be able to find another Shadow Visions if you want. So you can just keep discovering Shadow Visions to be able to, like, if you want to.
Yeah, personally, that I think that'd be a waste. You're gonna have 2 other options.
Yeah, it would be. If you want to be able to, like, play Yogg with this card. But that's an entirely different priest deck that you're going to want to work to begin with.
Yeah, I'm looking at that priest is going to be using it to get to their control options.
Now, the other card, or at least the other ideal that people have thrown with Shadow Visions, is using it to be able to discover the Ungoro pack that Elise can drop into the deck.
That's not a bad use for it either. But again, you're kind of searching for answers. So yeah, but overall, I think it's going to be a game changer. It's a meta-defining card.
Yeah, this is honestly, as far as constructed goes, this is a meta-defining card going forward, because you are going to use this to be able to search and plunder for your answers. So, like, I honestly say, not even as a priest main, but as someone who is just reviewing this card, everyone go out and craft 2 of it. Use the 800 dust, make 2 of it, put 2 of them into your priest deck, and just go crazy and have fun with it. Because it being able to get you answers is so useful. So are you good there, Bob?
Oh yeah.
Alright. Next card that we get to move on to is Cluchmother Zavas. It's the 2-cost, 2/2 Warlock Legendary. Whenever you discard this, give it 2/2 and return it to your hand. It's also a beast.
I just noticed it was a beast. I thought it was like, if anything, it'd be a demon, because that works with Warlock. That's a strange decision.
It's a strange decision, and it's also an interesting one in my opinion. Now, we talked before about the Lakari sacrifice. The quest of having to discard 6 cards. And, you discarding your resources. With Cluchmother Zavas, all you're doing is discarding this, buffing it by 2, and then putting it back into your hand. Yes, you are telegraphing to your opponent at that point that this is the card that's in your hand. However, with this card being a renewable resource, for your discard and / Disco Reno Lock, or not Reno Lock, but Disco Lock deck, this is a meta-defining card for that deck. because it becomes less resources you're wasting, and it becomes a recycle, and you can drop it whenever, and it just be this 2-cost XX where it became this big monstrosity that your opponent will have to make sure that they have the tool to respond to it. Also, given that it is a beast, and given that if you want to maybe try a different style, where your discard disco lock is concerned, you could run this with something like the Curator because of, like, Disco Zulok. So, if anything, it pulls it, like, right to your hand, and at this point, I'm going to toss it to Bulb.
Something like Disco Lock really needed to kind of seal it as one of the meta-defining decks going into this this new expansion was a very solid Warlock Legendary, which this is. This is essentially the Edwin Van Cleef of Disco Lock. It's an extremely powerful card. And yeah, it's definitely going to see play. I think if you're going to play Disco Lock, you need to be running this card. As for the Beast Tag, I was thinking about it some more, and I think the whole reason why the Beast Tag is there is not to encourage Curator, is not to encourage Disco Zulok, because I really don't think that will work as well. But most of the discard minions are demons. Cluchmother Zavas being a beast keeps you from using the demon buffs that you use for all the other disco minions on Cluchmother Zavas. It's a means of just keeping it from getting too out of control. Which means for Warlock, the only way they're going to have to really buff her is going to be having to repeatedly discard her. I guess you could try running Curator. I have some ideas of what you might pack in there. I don't think you would pack in a Murloc, maybe Cluchmother and Deathwing. I don't think you really need to pack in more than that. But really, I'm not sure how useful the Curator is going to be anyway, because you kind of want her in your opening hand. You want her in your hand as soon as possible.
Yeah.
To get the most use out of her. So Curator, trying to go for that long game, which is not going to really work for the deck. But yeah, it is the essential Disco Lock card. And that kind of makes me excited because, you know, that means, like, you know, if they're not going half in, they're going all in of trying to make this a really viable archetype. So this is kind of exciting for me. I'm so hoping we still see I know a lot of people were when they were theorizing about the Warlock Legendary, they were theorizing about a minion of every single time you discard a card about putting it back in your hand. Or not putting it back in your hand, but putting it back in your deck, or something like that. I still think that'd be a really good card for Disco Lock. I would maybe like to still see a minion with that appear. To basically keep it from just strangling itself, and that's why it was a good idea for Legendary, just a one-of, but I still wouldn't mind maybe seeing an epic minion with that to really kind of give Disco Lock a little bit more strength. But as it is right now, Disco Lock's going to be a very strong deck, and Cluchmother Zavas is why.
Yeah.
So, before we move any further, we're going to have to talk about the new tribe coming in this expansion. We've mentioned a little bit that there's going to be the Elemental tribe, but Blizzard has actually said what the playstyle revolving around the tribe is. Basically, for Elementals, the entire tribe, it works kind of like dragons, where dragons you had to have a dragon, you had to be holding a dragon in your hand to activate an effect. With Elementals, you have to have played an Elemental last turn. So if you play an Elemental last turn, for most elementals, it's going to it's then going to activate an effect on an elemental an elemental next turn. And there are some neutral elementals that kind of just get there that don't have effects that can just use to prime it, so that you can actually just continue to ramp up and just create this tidal wave of effects to basically create a strong deck. However, if you're going to have to stop at what this does mean is if you have to stop and answer a threat, and this is a problem that we find in a lot of these synergistic decks. It's a problem I ended up encountering when I built my totem deck. Is you basically you have a game plan of I want to do this by turn this, and this, which elementals force you to think ahead in terms of turns. But if there's a massive threat, you might have to go. I want to stay on this game plan, but I might have to deviate and delay my game plan just to take care of this threat. And then you have to identify, is it better to take care of the threat now or stick with the plan? Because just taking care of this threat might deviate me from my plan long enough that my opponent can take advantage of it. And that's something that you have to question when you're playing an elemental deck. It's going to be a very technical deck. It's probably going to be a very slow deck. It's not going to be a playstyle for everyone, and I'm not sure if there's going to be a lot of Hearthstone players now that are going to be able to really get into it. They also talked about when they were playing around the idea of the elemental tribe, some of the different ideas for synergies they had before they landed on this. One of them, which I found was interesting, Eddie, was they talked about that there were going to be elemental minions and elemental spells that fed off of each other, which I found very interesting, and I wish they would have done that because it reminds me of what Magic the Gathering did with the elemental with their elemental tag. Because I have an elemental fire deck, and being able to play it off so that like a card says, your elemental stuff costs less or something like that, and that would affect both elemental minions and elemental spells. I really like that idea. I felt like that would have worked more. But I think maybe for Hearthstone that would have been more work, and I'm sad they didn't go that direction. I think what we got is interesting enough. I'm just not sure if it's as playable as a lot of the other tribes, but it's at least interesting from a tribal viewpoint.
I have no comment, my good sir.
Okay, well let's just get into our very first elemental using this effect, and that is Ozruk. He's a 9-cost 5/5 legendary with taunt and the battle cry, gain +5 health for each elemental you played last turn. Ozruk could provide a massive swing. He could be essentially this huge wall that you can get by. And in that regard, he's actually pretty decent because I think a lot of people were figuring he's at least going to be a 5/10 or a 5/15, which is a pretty massive wall. And a lot of people's like, well, you can just kill it or hex it. But let's be honest. By the time you're this late in the game, you're probably not going to have an answer for something this big. However, I also think, let's just talk about, we've seen this get as big as 530. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry, guys, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to plan so many turns ahead, and just to get the synergy and the lineup and the tidal wave to get Ozruk to even be a 510 is going to be massive. I think on average we're going to see this guy more as a 510 than a 515, 520, 525. I think occasionally you're going to see 515, but I don't think you're going to see massive Ozruk turns. And given when we're going to break down a lot of the other elementals that follow, given that, Eddie, I'm not sure if a lot of elemental decks are really going to want to run Ozruk, because in general their class legendary elementals are a whole lot better, like hands down better. So I'm really not sure if you really want something this big and massive, even if it's a massive taunt, this late in the game for all this payoff when you are going to be paying off something better earlier, and this might not be your late game plan. That might have been your late game plan. So I'm not sure if Ozruk's really going to see play. I think it's one of those things that if you're going to run an elemental deck and you happen to draw Ozruk, you're going, well, cool, I might include him. I just don't think people are going to craft him, and I'm not sure how viable he's going to be in elemental decks.
I honestly completely agree with you on the viability of Ozruk. I'm not sure how many people are actually going to try to run him to make him like as big as he could possibly be, and then attempt to make it to where he's like that 520, 515, or whatever that the development team has discussed about seeing him get to. Now, I will be the first person to at least go out on a limb in a video and say that with Ozruk, I can see him being used in meme/OTK priest because of the fact of, okay, if I can at least get this bad mamma jamma to a 515, I got this. Because vitality, and then inner fire faints. Because he then becomes a 60-60, and it's like, haha, I did this with him, because you had no way of being able to actually get rid of him off my board. Ha 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 ha. I see people at least may go out of their way to attempt to meme with him. But realistically, I just don't see him being something that's crafted. Now, I could be completely and utterly wrong, and we actually start to move toward a mid to late game metagame to where something like Ozruk could be viable. But as of right now, I am putting him in the playable / meme deck area.
I think that the priest, that hypothetical priest deck is a pipe dream. Maybe somebody will be nuts enough to try running it, but I don't think it's going to be that big because priests would need more elementals than what they want, what they have, and they're going to want to hold them back. And because priest, even though I think even though Hearthstone says priest is one of the classes for elementals, it doesn't look like they're really priming priest to be an elemental class.
No. What they said when it came to the classes for elementals, they said it was going to be shaman and mage.
I know it was going to be shaman and mage.
Class. Now, don't get me wrong,
but a priest just doesn't have it, and they'd have to hold back these small neutral, maybe they're one class elemental, hold these small elementals back just to play it for a huge turn. And you're like, haha, meme, but are you really going to want to do that? It's one of those things like, this could happen, but I think this could happen, and this is the reality is so far removed, I don't think it was even worth mentioning.
I know. The main reason I mention it is because, of course, I look at someone like Toast, who may do it.
If we try to account for on every card something that Toast may do, we're going to be here forever. It's not worth mentioning.
Yeah, I know. I just figure that that is something that it could be done. But also, the ideal of, if elementals really do take off in the meta, there is the ideal that priests could try to start doing the control aspect and using the thought steals, the mind visions, the shifting shades, and cards like that to be able to start collecting resources from my opponent. And then it's like, I'm using my deck and your deck to do this. But that's a whole different ideal and a whole different line thought of theory to actually come. So, I think we're good on Ozruk,
Oh,
yes?
yeah.
So, we get to move on to Stone Sentinel. It's a 7-cost, 4/4 Shaman Epic with the battle cry. If you played an elemental last turn, summon 2/3 elementals with taunt. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where I love reading stuff from the Hearthstone community. Because you see people who have went on and ragged about the 4-cost 7/7 Faceless Behemoth. And now you get to see people saying, well, you know what? Blizzard has went about and went out of its way to troll us and have some fun by making a 7-cost 4/4. Thank you guys. I love you for this because it makes me laugh reading it because it's just so far just off the wall that it reminds me that the community isn't completely and utterly toxic. So, if anything, onto the card. It's pretty good. Given that you can take this Sentinel, and on turn 6, you could play Fire Elemental, be able to deal 3 damage to something, and then drop this onto board, giving you 3 bodies, or just playing 1 or 2 smaller elemental the turn before, and then playing Stone Sentinel to be able to make sure its trigger goes off. It's pretty good. But if you don't have the ability to be able to actually make use of its battle cry, then this 7-cost 4/4 is pretty bad. So you want to be able to make sure that you get the ability to use its effects effectively. On the wild side of things, if you can somehow get it out there with Bran to give you 4 2/3s with taunt, good for you. And plus, it's a 7-cost. It also brings up the legendary card, which we'll talk about later, as synergy, and just some of the synergies with the elementals that I've seen so far are making me actually excited to attempt to play Elemental Shaman. And that's as far as I'll go. Bob, you're up.
Now, previously I talked about Ozruk the whole idea about Ozruk and viability and maybe not being exactly what the elemental decks want or need to be very strong, very viable. On the other hand, you have Stone Sentinel, which is exactly what they need. It's not asking something crazy like, play a lot of elementals, and the more you play, the more 2/3 taunts you. It's just saying, no, just play one, you get this effect off, and this is a very solid effect. This is exactly what you want in the late game, and who cares about the 4/4 stat line? Stone Sentinel, if you're playing this in an elemental deck, which you should, you're going to get this battle cry off every single time. And this is a very strong battle cry because what was it, Spirit Wolves?
Spirit Wolves.
Yeah, Spirit Wolves is a strong card, and this is essentially, a 7-cost that will 7-cost 4. This is a 4/4 minion that summons Spirit Wolves. So it's pretty much, since you're going to pretty much guaranteed you play the elemental last turn. Just imagine this as a 4-cost 4/4 that basically you're playing a 4-cost 4/4 and 3-cost Spirit Wolves without any overload. because I know you guys in the Hearthstone community are all about your stats per cost. Otherwise, if you're just looking at the card about how viable you just want to play it, this is a very strong card. This is a very viable card, and this is pretty much what elemental decks need. If you're playing an elemental shaman, you're playing this card, and it is essentially going to be one of the, if not the card that makes the elemental shaman deck. And I'm actually very excited. It's one of the few things that if I decide to play an elemental deck, I definitely want one of these. So up next, we have Flame Geyser, which is a 2-cost mage spell, which deals 2 damage and adds a 1/2 elemental to your hand. It's okay. If you're playing an elemental deck, then you're going to be playing 2 of these. If not, maybe just Frostbolt, unless you really want the elemental in hand. And really, like I said with Pyros, and actually I might as well address it now. Now that we're seeing elemental synergy, I'm just going to admit I was wrong about Pyros. I think Pyros may have a place in a mage deck, similar to how there was a mech mage deck. I think Pyros is going to be essential to an elemental mage deck. But essentially, again, I'm going to outright say with Flame Geyser that this is an amazing spell for an elemental deck. If they had stuck with their idea of spells being tagged to elementals, this would be kind of cool. For any other mage deck, this just is not going to cut it. Because you have Frostbolt, and you have a lot of other spells. I'm just not sure a lot of mage players are going to want to run Flame Geyser in their decks. Yeah, you get a 1/2 elemental in your hand, but again, with mage, if you're mainly spell focused, that 1/2 elemental is not that important. You are more focused on the damage and being able to control the board, maybe have the tempo, and Flame Geyser is just not going to give that to you. So, it's good for elemental mage. I'm just not sure it's good for any other mage. It's an okay card.
It really, just as a real correction, it was Feral Spirit.
Feral Spirit.
Which was the card that we were looking for.
Feral Spirit summons Spirit Wolves, so.
Yeah. We had the right token, just the wrong card name.
Yeah.
So, anyway, when it comes to the mage card, I honestly see it as just okay. The only way you're probably going to be thinking about running this is if you're running it with elementals and their synergy in mind. Otherwise, you have Frostbolt, which is same cost, 1 damage more, and also a better effect overall because you're freezing the minion in place. So that's really all I had to say on Flame Geyser. Do you have anything to say or anything else for it?
No, I think we're on the same page there.
Okay, how are we looking?
Go.
Unite the Murlocs.
Nope, sorry. Firefly's next.
Damn, I was getting ahead of myself.
Yep.
Firefly! It is a 1-cost, 1/2 neutral, with the battle cry of add a 1/2 elemental to your hand, with the stats of 1/2. It's an elemental. It's a very balanced 1-drop. Which, when it comes to Hearthstone, we've had to yell at Blizzard for making busted 1-drops. Small-time Buccaneer. But Firefly is very, very balanced. So, You drop it, you get your elemental. If anything, I see something like Firefly being played in a potential, like, quick drop token druid deck. Or, of course, the elementals as a whole. So, Firefly. Good card. Bulb.
I'm always a big fan of decks being able to run a 1-drop to kind of give them an early game. This is the 1-drop for elementals. This is your early game for elementals. You can play it on curve. You can get a really good, solid early game with Firefly that gives you another 1-cost 1/2. Or this also provides for the late game, because this can be a problem with 1-drops. For the late game, it provides a means of priming your elemental play for the next turn. So if you have plenty of these 1-drops, this might be the way you prime Ozruk. But if nothing else, it makes sure that maybe you can do some sort of removal, but maybe still prime an elemental play for the next turn. This is a very versatile card in elemental decks. This is a decent card overall if you just need a decent 1-drop, because you're going to get another 1/2 minion, so that can allow you to be a little bit more versatile. But I think this is mainly going to see play maybe in like those token decks or anything that is going to be using elementals. It's a very solid 1-drop card, kind of stuff that we really need to see. And I want to say one more thing before we end off and move on, and that's take my love, take my land, take me where I cannot stand. I don't care. I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me. Well, that's all that we're going to be able to cover for this installment. We have a lot more to go. And until then, guys, we will see you next time.